Hey, and welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Nora Bateson, filmmaker, writer, and educator. In this part 2, we continue our discussion about sense-making, order and chaos, complex systems and cultures, and what we really need for social and cultural change.
For all the links and show notes from both episodes, go to futurethinkers.org/106. Hey, and welcome to futurethinkers.org, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and consciousness. I'm Mike Gilliland.
And I'm Yuvia Ivanova. If you're new to the show and you want to get a list of our favorite books, popular episodes, and to join our community, go to futurethinkers.org/start.
I wanted to maybe shift to a little bit about how we handle order and chaos and this desire to, fit things into boxes so that we can be comfortable in it, which I think is kind of the root of that impulse. It's not necessarily for the benefit of all of humanity or to make sense of the world. It's generally because we get all uncomfortable when things don't make sense to us.
Or when we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And so in our call yesterday, we had quite a long discussion about what to do about chaos and how to deal with it. And one of the things I was trying to describe was how kind of the more you immerse yourself in chaos and try to find some level of comfort, the more you move the goalpost of what you view to be chaotic. And you can kind of expand your horizons between order and chaos. I wonder what you think about that. If you think that's true, what do you think we can do about chaos, or respond? How can we respond to it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple of things. One is that I think people have very different ideas of what chaos feels like, and when they're in chaos and when they're not. I have a bunch of kids, and I'm on the road all the time, and so my chaos threshold is probably much higher than somebody who, might live alone and, keeps their dishes done and knows what's going to happen every day, and they know where their socks are, and they can actually reply to all their emails, and, that's a different level of chaos. But so it's not a thing. It's a relative thing. Let's just say that. Okay. Yeah. So then there's the question of what do you do? How do we I remember hanging out with Ralph Abraham. Do you know who Ralph Abraham is? No. You should interview him. Yeah, he's great. He's like this kind of psychedelic Santa Claus of math.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's fabulous. And he's one of the people who
you had me at psychedelic Santa Claus of math.
Yeah, he's excellent. And he's one of the mathematicians that helped with the sort of original chaos math. And that original chaos math is in some small portion inspired by some work that was done by my dad. And it was work around this question of what is schismogenesis. Okay. Ooh, that's a big, fat, giant.
Yeah, that's a nice word.
Yes. So schismo is to, break apart, and genesis is to,
create.
Birth, right, to create. So schismogenesis is basically about how systems fall apart. Okay. This is interesting. You'll like this. So in the beginning of my dad's work, there were two different kinds of schismogenesis. And basically what we're talking about is recognizing patterns of relationship that over time become what destroys the relationship. Right?
Right.
Okay. So one of those kinds of schismogenesis was called complementary. And complementary schismogenesis has to do with two complementary types of people, organizations, whatever, organisms. And so you might have one that's dominant and one that is more passive or submissive. And in that's good. It makes a nice relationship, and they know where they are, and it's good. Except that over time, the dominant one may become increasingly dominant, and the submissive one may become increasingly submissive until the relationship breaks. Okay. All right. Schismogenesis number 2 was symmetrical. Now, symmetrical schismogenesis looks much more like an arms race or basic, capitalistic competition. It's keeping up with the Joneses. I have 3 apples, you need 4 apples. I have 6 apples, you need 8 apples. I get 10 apples, you have 12 apples. Until eventually our competition becomes insane and it breaks the relationship. All right. There's another kind of schismogenesis that was developed after my father, and it was developed by some Finnish people, and it's called systems holdback. Okay, now in systems holdback, what happens is that I don't put into the relationship what I could put in, because I know you're not going to put in what you could put in. And since you know that I'm not going to put in what I could put in, you don't put in what you could put in. And pretty soon, the relationship is entirely devitalized. Okay, so now let's talk about chaos and how to be in chaos. And let's look at those 3 kinds of schismogenesis. And it's the last one I'm particularly interested in, because it has to do, again, with this notion not only of meta, but of aesthetic and tonality and texture. So are we going into a time of systems crash and various forms of chaotic deconstruction of the way we used to live life? Probably so. So given that, the next question becomes, what tone shall we bring to that? What tone is the chaos? What's the feeling of the chaos? What's in that? And for me, that is why I wanted to tell you about systems holdback, because either it's about I'm in it for me, I'm taking care of me, or there's the possibility of a kind of integrity and generosity that is of another order than the thing that we were brought up to believe was natural. And so I think it's that last thing that I'm really interested in doing whatever I can to contribute. If my community is in chaos and my community is in a world of chaos and my family is in that community, what is it that I can do that brings a layer of logic to that chaos that is the logic of mutual care, humor, curiosity, learning, improvisation? That's I think where I'm going with it.
It's like,
does that make
like adding or increasing your level of give a shit.
yeah, exactly. And again, it's that question of where's the edge of me? Well, if the edge of me is actually way out in the everything, then I better take care of everything, because that's how I take care of me. If I need to frame it in individualistic terms, but then, basically I am not an independent agent in this. I am an interdependent agent in this. So how does that play out?
This is so interesting because it seems to describe a very natural process that it's easy to find a lot of examples of. The tree doesn't have like a contract with the animals that eat the apples. It just has this process that has had a feedback mechanism for millions of years between the animals and the surrounding environment, that everything is interdependent. If it stops producing the apples, the animals around stop eating it, they stop spreading the seeds, all of that. So I like this idea that nature almost starts with generosity and reciprocation rather than planning things out and doing the first 2 types of what was it? Schismogenesis. That's a new good word.
Yeah. It's a really good word for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. But that generosity is not about some kind of, altruistic, I'm a better person than you because I have this extra thing, so I'm going to give you one. And, it's not that kind of generosity. It's generosity at the level of my heart is pumping blood to my feet generosity.
Mm.
right? It's another thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not really like I am somehow being a good person. And same with that notion of integrity. It's not really about having some moral high ground. It's about showing up and paying attention. And, essentially there's piles of dog shit everywhere. Don't step in it. And you're not necessarily a good person because you didn't step in the dog shit. You just were paying attention.
Yeah.
And so I think, I want to be clear about that, because I'm really allergic to this idea of, there's some sort of, purity or higher version of self that we can embody, and, everybody should be like me. Like, I really can't stand that approach right now. And my sense is, and I'm just working on this new piece of work right now that starts with the sentence, wisdom you're looking for is much kinkier than you thought.
I like that.
And it's not, this is not about it's not about some kind of purification process. This is about this is about sensitivity to systemic complexity, which is rough and weird and confusing and not necessarily
politically correct.
Yeah. Or politically incorrect. Yeah. It's it's a beyond that question. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something we often talk about when we talk about integrating the shadow. It's like wholeness includes everything. It includes our fear and our discomfort and our violent tendencies and all of those things. And you can't be whole by cutting off things that you don't like or that are kind of icky or you don't understand. It's more like, how do we have all of that and recognize all of it and still operate with some sort of grace and sense and connectedness?
Yeah. And grace is not necessarily some angelic, harmonic light show. So,
what else I find really interesting about that is that being in touch with your kind of dark side or shadow or whatever you want to call it is really helpful for experiencing a sense of compassion with other people. Like I've had more compassion for people dealing with, exhibiting just terrible behaviors out in the world because I recognize that part of myself. But I also see, the type of person you've described in this holier than thou thing being incredibly uncompassionate to people they just view as evil by default because they're not in touch with their own dark side, Or it's like the whole movement against white men at the moment.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And I guess it's, I'm not that comfortable with an us them thing, but I feel that there's been, this is in the, it's in our matrix. This is in our culture. Is this idea that there is that evolution is an ever refining process towards some sort of enlightenment, and school takes you up the ladder and you go up this enlightenment, there's all these ladders and stages everywhere you look. Everyone's got a ladder and a stage and a 3 steps and a 4 steps, and if you're in the 5th level, then you're super groovy, right?
Then that unlocks the 6th level.
Right. And so I guess that for me, I just sort of have to recognize that this is part of the illusion. That's my point when I say the wisdom is kinkier than you thought it was going to be. It's just that the illusion had to do with these weird hierarchical levels, and they're everywhere. It's part of the patterns that we're trying to get out of. So, and that's why I feel that, with all the best intentions, some of my dearest colleagues really do believe that they have to change people's mindset. And I'm really uncomfortable with that idea.
It's quite coercive.
Yeah. It's part of the reason we left the blockchain industry. We were working quite a lot in that industry, but everything's about incentive design. there.
Right?
You know?
And there it is again.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, how can we design the perfect system that incentivizes people to behave in a narrow fashion so that we can have economic prosperity or whatever?
Manipulate people in the perfect way.
Yeah, dangle the carrot in just the right way that everyone aligns their behaviors.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's this sort of, for me, there's so much in this welcoming of complexity. Mm-hmm. And, if I look at my own experience, for example, in the Me Too question, there's a level at which I can look at it and just hashtag Me Too. I have been, everything. Mm-hmm. Everything has happened. And it's happened more than once. And it's happened at ecological conferences. It's happened at systems and complexity conferences, right? So I don't want to hear about there's some, sort of characterized version of that. It's everywhere. Mm-hmm. So if I keep my Me Too experience at that level, then I can just jump on and say, Me Too, we got to stop this. But the deeper parts of that question have to do with participation in a culture that is inherently celebrating predatorial behavior. And I have benefited from that culture. So what is it about the culture that we're in that is so rewarding to the predating? I don't think that's a word. To the predator.
Predating. I think we may have just made up a word, but
okay, to that predatorial behavior process, and how, if I were going to look at what's the meta, what are in the conditions in which that makes sense, how would I begin to respond to those questions in my own marriage, with my kids, in my own relationships? How am I going to hold that relationship to notions of success? Really, ultimately, that's what is at the core of the Me Too problem.
I still feel like there's this attempt to eliminate all of those behaviors. Like, as you said, you were just hashtag Me Too recently. I thought in reverse. I was like, it was mead a few days ago, and it's like, but there's always this tension between the two, and it's like, it's not that we're trying to have better system, or there's the word again, systems of how to interact with each other. It's like we're trying to cut off behaviors altogether.
And what I think is really sort of the most honorable thing in this moment is just to say, I actually have no idea. I have no idea how to be in relationship without triggering this ancestry of deep, steeped presuppositions around what it is to be attractive, what it is to be dominant, what it is to, I don't even know. So for me, the most honorable place to go with this is not a place of this is what it is and this is what we have to change and these are the new rules. Okay. But more like, I have no idea what to do with this. And all I know is that I don't really want to contribute to a future of this behavior continuing and people getting hurt. But I don't know anything else. I don't know how to be in any other types of relational process. I've never been in them. So I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, but I do want to. And so I'm willing to just, be quiet. I'm willing to yell. I'm willing to get crazy and freaky and, do something totally unusual. But whatever it is, I'm willing to go, but I have really a lot of nervousness around jumping to a new solid platform.
Yeah, and you're right. The meta of these kinds of patterns goes so deep. I was thinking about this a while ago, how the way that we treat the biosphere, the way that we relate to nature, is often the same kind of attitude.
Yeah, exactly.
As exists in this like predator and prey dynamic that is being pointed out by the Me Too movement.
Exactly.
And we're all doing this regardless of our gender. I mean, we're exploiting nature as if it's an inanimate object that we can take from without consequence.
And there it is. It's the same issue.
Yeah.
Of exploitation. So it's really important that we pay attention to these patterns of exploitation. But they're if you punish people for drilling oil and you punish people for making unwanted sexual advances, how's that going to actually deal with the meta of what's happening here? Because in every other way, the society says, good on you. You got the girl, you got the money, you were cunning and you were clever and you beat the system and you are powerful, you are this, you are that. And so, a few criminal accusations here and there isn't going to do anything to undo that version of success that has to do with being wealthy.
And a conqueror.
And somehow influential. So that's that stick bug thing again. We're back to the potatoes.
I like these little memes.
Yeah.
That develop.
It's like you can't separate the agent from the arena, in the words of John Vervaeke.
Yeah, you can't get the grapes out of the wine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can't get the salt out of the broth. You cannot get out of the context. I mean, we are in the matrix. So that's why the cracks are so needed.
Yep.
And so paying attention to the cracks, but paying attention to the cracks is not easy because you don't really see them. That's the whole point.
Yep.
You're not supposed to see them. You've been trained to not see them. And that's, this sort of need to diagram and make things flat is a way to make them seeable in the way that we're used to seeing things. The second they're in that form, you can no longer get the matrix out of it again.
You're back in a new box.
Or the old box.
Or the old box.
Yeah. So, yeah. And this is, I guess it's that thing of bringing it all the way back into our most intimate selves as parents, as lovers, as just friends and human beings, as hosts to our microbiome organisms, to, at that level, there's, that's the level where the understanding and the familiarity with complexity is a game changer. It's so interesting to see what's happening with this Greta thing.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up actually because we've been talking about that, and it's
subject.
like
Oof,
everyone's in support,
so
but we're like, maybe not panicking is the best. Maybe that's not the best thing to do. I don't know. Unpopular opinion.
I mean, I guess it's so interesting to me that the culture that we live in develops celebrities and then totally forgets that they have only their own voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then she gets, in big trouble for everything she didn't say and the voice that she brought. She's just one instrument in the choir, and honestly, she's not saying anything that other people haven't been saying forever.
Mm-hmm.
I after I watched her UN speech the other day, I watched the Severance Suzuki speech from 1992. Have you seen that?
No.
Probably not. Okay. Check it out. Severance Suzuki is the daughter of David Suzuki, who, David Suzuki, right? So she did a speech to the UN in 1992, and she was 12.
Wow.
Okay. And at that moment, everyone thought, this is it. The kids are going to speak up. We're going to change the world. This is it. ...
Yeah.
So, there's a part of me that's just sort of like, Greta's just a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she's saying something important for kids to hear, that kids can speak. And it's important. I think I'm going to write a little quick blog thing about, what it is to be a parent on the other side of this, because it's an invitation for parents to actually step down off of their rigidity and recognize that actually we don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's, that's the thing, is that it isn't really about the UN. It isn't as though the UN can't even make any decisions. The whole thing is a farce,
Yeah.
What difference does it make that she addressed the UN? They don't do anything.
Yeah.
As far as I can figure out.
Yeah.
So
it's the Matrix all over. Like, it's all a big show, and it's taking up media space, and our attention is there. But my question, whenever I see this kind of big performances, like, while our attention is over here, what is happening over there? And why is our attention being drawn over here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's sanctioned media. That always kind of bothers me. Sanctioned media. That's allowed to get through. Why is that message allowed? Because a lot of the important stuff is not allowed.
I mean, how it is that we became so ready and loyal to the New York Times after Trump. Like, what the fuck, actually? Where were they for the last 50 years of climate demonstrations, of, feminism, of, where have they been?
Yeah.
They were
it's
just
easy
in the
to just
pockets
not
of,
like Trump.
Or, I mean, I don't know. I find it really weird that all these people who for years have been like, the press is never at our demonstrations, they're never, the press, and then all of a sudden they're like, save the press. Like, wait, what? What do you mean? Where have they been? They didn't help you. Yeah. So I don't know what happens with that, but it's the thing is crumbling, and the crumbling is actually, it's really something to witness, especially right now. Britain is like in the front row of the show of crumbling, and oops, the prime minister shut down parliament, broke the law, and misled the queen. So where's the page on what to do when that happens? And of course, there is no page.
The cultural sensitivity I've noticed. I watched a documentary recently. It was a British documentary about parenting and nutrition and dealing with kind of different childhood trends. And so one was about the nutrition one was really fascinating. How out of touch people are with nutrition, that the whole question of that segment of the show was, how much ice cream should I give? How many portions of ice cream is okay to give to my kid? How much pasta or pizza is a safe or healthy portion? Not a mention of vegetables or protein or fat or anything like that. It was just, how much pizza is okay? How much microwave fucking pizza? Man, what are you doing? And then everyone's, a massive group of adults and children all together discussing this. And it's like,
then
is anyone
serious.
seeing? Yeah, dead serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is anyone seeing this? Yeah.
Yeah, I know all about that. And then there's the tech questions. Woohoo. That's another rabbit hole of confusion.
Like what?
Yeah. Just how many hours of screen time a day.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know that. I'm right in the middle of that.
How much heroin is a safe amount?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. No heroin. So methadone. How much methadone?
Yeah, exactly. What's a safe portion of heroin? I like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. Here we are, and we're in it. We have kids. We're looking at our movement through the next generation, the next 10 years. It's going to be a wild ride. Where are you guys based?
We are Canadian, but we live in Bulgaria.
Cool.
Yeah. There's so much more we could talk about what we're doing and why we're here and that sort of stuff. But a lot of projects on the go, and some of them relate to Bulgaria that are kind of interesting.
It's a point that I've made that kind of people glaze over. It's like, we talk about how do we fix nature and blah, blah, blah. But actually,
stop fucking with it.
Stop fucking with it. Yeah.
Stop fixing it.
Yeah. After the collapse of communism, all the factories that they built with the idea of like expanding and colonizing nature, they shut down because they weren't profitable.
Right.
And nature took over and it fixed itself. And now there's bears and wolves again. And like
biodiversity is one of the best in all of Europe.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
And it's from an economical perspective, it's like, it's dead.
Dead territory.
Dead territory. It's a country that's like losing population, and it's
there's no money to be made.
Yeah.
No money to be made. But
perfect.
But the biodiversity, like we go into nature and it's fucking amazing. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And the same thing is going to happen at a social level. So the forgotten people, the people who are outside the sanctioned media, that's where the change is.
It's interesting. We were just talking before this interview. I was commenting on how listening to you talk, it reminds me almost like of a meditative process, like a mindfulness process. Like you're pointing out the things that are already there and just drawing people's attention to them. And like it's not like you're inventing anything new. You're just like, look at this and notice this. And how about this? And it's like all these things are just popping out, but they're already there,
Yeah, they're there. It's all there. Which is, I think, hopefully that makes it all a little easier, because I always get accused of being really abstract. And I don't think I'm abstract at all. I think I'm absolutely down to earth and practical. But funny, other people don't seem to see it like that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's because you break people's context. Like they have some sort of a frame that they're looking at the world through, and you're bringing all these different things out, and they're like, oh, fuck, that doesn't fit into my frame. Ah!
Yeah, exactly.
It's not useful. It's not relevant. Feelings. Ooh.
Right. I mean, it's so much easier to have a completely polarized idea about Me Too than it is to say, what does create my sexual desire? Am I, presenting an idea of what I think it means to be desirable from inside a cultural matrix that is going to trigger the flip side of that, which then I can point to and say that's aggressive sexual behavior.
Yeah.
It's you just can't pull those things apart.
Yeah.
So,
or how are we naive about our monkey nature? Like where we would expect to be in a certain situation and not trigger those responses.
And this is where I feel, a little bit, I don't know what to make of Jordan Peterson. Honestly, I don't know what to make of it, because on the one hand, I can really see that he's speaking to that sense of total disorientation that is taking place in the gender space right now. On the other hand, I'm not sure that he's bringing a future that I want to live in.
In what way?
Well, I think that for me, I'm interested in what is possible in terms of mutual learning. And so any kind of justification of what happened in the past is only really interesting in so much as it is sort of illuminating those cracks in the matrix. And so I'm really curious, what it means to be in my own exploration of being, of desire, of mutual respect and learning with the people around me. And I don't think things were better in the past. I actually don't think that anything we've done with gender so far has been particularly helpful to anyone, frankly. You know, I mean, I have 6 kids. I don't think any of them want to grow up and be anybody's wife or husband. Yeah, I don't think they want, I think they just kind of feel like, oh God, husbands live like this and wives live like that. And who would want to live like either of those possible roles? Mm. So it's sort of this sense of, I don't know where we're going, but I'd really like to hold the territory open to possibility. Mm. And so, in that sense, I kind of differ with where.
So do you think he's attempting to narrow things down into kind of more traditional roles or perspectives?
I don't really know what he's doing. I can't really, every time I think I have a grasp on it, I feel like it shifts. So it's a little bit slippery.
I can say that I've definitely dived into hours and hours of his content, and
then you know it much better than I do. Yeah. Well, so what do you see?
I think he's fascinating in such a deep thinker, and he's dived. The most interesting content is the content I think that relates to Carl Jung, which he has gone so deep with. I think a lot of his perspective is very much colored by his study of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the amount of suffering that has gone on with that. Like he has made a life study of suffering. And as a result, he's highly motivated to prevent that suffering from happening again. But it also colors his perspective about the world. He thinks everything is suffering. He's made that statement many, many times and then built foundational arguments off of the idea that life is suffering, period. And I've, and the Buddhists say the same thing, and it's in some ways that's hard to argue with, but it certainly is visible in all of his perspectives that he's viewing reality through that lens and attempting to pull away from the possibility of repeating those same mistakes. So I appreciate it. At the same time, I take some of what he says with a grain of salt. But I think for the most part, he is just trying to reduce suffering and make people more resilient and kind of deal with this crisis of masculinity and help men find their place by taking on responsibility and by, just he uses this term "clean up your room" quite a lot. And we did an interview with Rebel Wisdom a few weeks back, and we talked about this concept of clean up your room. What does that mean? Because he uses it in a metaphorical way that I don't think people are really grasping, which is take responsibility for your life. Stop making excuses. Stop outsourcing your sovereignty and responsibility to external agents. Take responsibility. Take action where you can. If you don't have your own life in order, your own house, how can you expect to tell everyone else in the world how to live their lives? It's the whole critique on postmodernists wanting to change the world without having their own lives in order. So, and someone commented recently about our interview and about this whole thing. And it has actually informed quite a lot of our conversation today. And the comment was, we don't have time to focus on ourselves and fix our situation. The world is burning. We have to do something now. And this sense of urge. And then he followed up this comment with, we need to vote in some
leader
guy,
who
some
has
leader
their
with
stuff
the right,
sorted out.
Yeah, who has all of this sorted out. And then he literally suggested as well that we have soldiers to enforce that these ideas, grand ideas, are implemented. I was like, wow, that escalated quickly to a complete relinquishing of sovereignty in all directions. And, more of the same thing, more of the same. We need someone to fix it all. So he, and I had to so I responded to that by trying to illustrate this point. It means take responsibility, take the time to think, about your solutions.
Do your own sense making, even if it's limited, even if you're not well versed in economics or whatever, but try to understand it.
Yeah.
As opposed to just saying oh, Elon Musk should fix it or whoever.
Yeah, make him the global dictator. It's like, so on that level, I think you and Jordan Peterson actually would agree on a lot of points.
I think we would too.
Yeah.
I do think we would agree on a lot of points. I guess for me, it's also just, I mean, here's my question. What the hell is masculinity? What the hell is femininity? I get equally irritated when I hear people saying, this is the era of the feminine. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, who told you what the feminine is? What is the feminine? Yeah. And is it real? Is that even a real thing? Or is it just, a bunch of narrative and mythology? And I mean, am I feminine? What is feminine? Is that me? Like, the second I ask that question, where did I get that idea? I realized it has nothing to do with something internal. It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are trying to compartmentalize it from a social perspective and say that it's all socially constructed and it's this and that whole gender bending thing is occurring now. But I think a lot of it is just hormonally mediated.
As far as human femininity.
Yeah, and masculinity too. It's like I noticed so many of my traits, masculine traits, changing over time, depending on how much I'm working out, how much testosterone is in my body at that moment. It's like suddenly I'm dominant, I'm confident, I'm happy, I know exactly what I'm doing. Life makes sense and all of this stuff. So it's like, and then as soon as I'm low in testosterone, it's like I feel weak-willed. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel unsure. I feel like I don't have a place. And it's not to say that testosterone gives me that, but like an appropriate amount of the hormones, estrogen or testosterone, will kind of inform your identity a lot more than people are giving credit. So they're trying to deconstruct and say it's all socially constructed. Biology has nothing to do with it. And I'm saying, no.
No, I mean, I think biology has everything to do with it, but how biology is responding to epistemology, there's another whole can of worms.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Like, I just like that question of desire. Where is it? Is that even mine? Yeah. Is it mine? I don't even know. And so I think for me, I'm okay with not knowing that.
Yeah.
And exploring in that space. And so, but maybe I just, I just worry that there's such a hurry to first of all, identify toxic masculinity, whatever that is, and then to find non-toxic masculinity. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if any of this is the right question.
Oh, it's brutal. It's just brutal. And this, I think anything to do with masculinity is being formulated into this toxic masculinity bubble. And it's like I've had discussions with people. I gave a talk in Berlin a little while ago about resilience. And I brought up the whole concept of toxic masculinity, and I didn't really realize I was giving this talk to like very left-leaning people in that room, and I had a lot of like arms crossed in the talk. I just barreled through it anyway. And afterwards, a lot of people came up to me and were like, "There's no place for aggression, and all of that is toxic, and resilience is just it just deconstructed everything I said." And I just gave I felt like what was a good example of what was happening in that conference itself, that there were a lot of breakout groups and there were certain people within those groups that were actually dominating the entire conversation, all men. And I was like, okay, they're being aggressive. Would you agree? And they're like, well, yeah, they're being aggressive. And I asked, has any of your techniques of passivity or asking for permission to speak worked with them? No. Do you know what has worked? Aggression. Where like you respond to, a little bit of masculine aggression, meeting masculine aggression sometimes actually de-escalates the problem. So it's not like we can make a blanket rule where all aggression is wrong. It's like sometimes you need just an equal and opposite force. Not always, but and that actually played out quite a number of times where someone was just met by a show of force on the opposite direction, saying like, hey, maybe you're dominating the conversation. Maybe let it go to someone else who hasn't had the chance to speak as much. And they go, oh yeah, sorry, okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was
exactly. I mean, I it happens to me all the time that I will post something that's like a something that goes kind of, it's a question that's just meant to live in the realm of, let's just think about this.
Mhm.
Don't rush to an answer, but there's an urge to answer this.
Yes.
And, and most of the time it's guys
Yeah.
who just have to answer the question.
Yes.
And it's like, come on, guys, just let this be a question.
Yeah.
But it isn't, I don't think that's a masculinity or a femininity thing. I get into arguments with my friends at Holochain about this all the time because they're always talking about representation. And I'm like, look, you don't seem to understand. There are huge swaths of population who will not contribute because they have never contributed. They do not see themselves as part of the conversation. If you are generating representation based on those who contribute, you're going to end up with all the same dominant characters that you have now. Because there will be a lot of people who, men and women alike, who don't feel that it's their right to take part in the conversation.
That is interesting. And it does relate to what I was just saying in the conversation about giving people the opportunity to speak. And for some reason, there's an additional point to this that I'm just realizing now, which is important. The calling upon people to speak. Because we have our weekly calls, and there are a number of people who just have brilliant perspectives. I love to hear from them, but they're shy and quiet and reserved, and it's like, if I don't call on them and point the spotlight at them, they will never say anything. And so that's a bit of like a non-sensitive dominant approach that I would be like, you speak. It's like, but it works, right? There is like this interplay of what you could call masculine and femininity working with each other in a very positive way.
Yeah. Or whatever that is. I mean, maybe we're mistaken to call it.
Yeah.
To name it in a gender sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, all I can say is that it's like I said earlier, the change we're looking for is not at the top.
Mm.
It's not with the places where the change is going to come is not with the change makers. I am absolutely convinced. In all my future work right now I'm not doing any projects with change makers.
Interesting, eh? That is challenging a bunch of our assumptions. We want to do this retreat center in Bulgaria, and a lot of the talk about it is like, can we change the minds of change makers and that sort of thing? It's like,
or can we attract the people who are like action takers, change makers?
Yeah.
But
those people that really are, those are people who are going to be, that mom in the East LA projects who's the one who actually has food to feed the kids. That's the person you want in that room. It feels like there's two directions, and one of them is a closing down and the other one is an opening up to complexity. Just to me, it's really interesting to see what will happen here. But I don't know. One thing for sure, we cannot do climate change without social justice. And we can't do social justice without climate change. And we just, neither those things are inextricable. But the way that they're put together right now gives me a stomach ache, like, who cleaned up after the marches?
Oh, yeah.
Right? You start asking that question and it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Who manufactured your cell phone? Was it 12-year-old girls in China and Bangladesh and wherever else? Probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to get a new phone recently and I was so pissed off. Just pissed off. I was pissed off. I was like, shit, why is this thing broken? I just bought it 3 years ago. The camera still works. Everything still works, but it's broken because it's been built in obsolescence, fixed to break now. So I have to buy a new one. And so then I was pissed about the built-in obsolescence. So I went in the store in Stockholm and I said, I need a new phone. And they said, what features are you looking for in your new phone? And I said, well, I want one that doesn't have any slavery or built-in obsolescence or toxic materials for the environment. And they looked at me like, well, this one has a good camera. and I said, no, seriously, I'll just give me one with no slavery. I'll just start there. And they were like, well, what are you talking about? So I went to the back of the store. They looked it up online. They started Googling slavery and cell phone manufacturing, blah, blah. The whole store ended up in this search online with me, looking for the phone that had the least amount of slavery. It was so interesting. And, of course, there are none. There's the Fair phone, but it doesn't really work. And so we ended up, it was just the process. Actually, just the process was really worthwhile because this was a whole group of people who work in cell phone for, sales. And I was like, look, if I had to sit down with one of those kids and explain to them why I need a new phone, I can tell you that as a mom, I couldn't do it. How could I possibly explain to one of those children's in the minds that I need a phone so badly that it's worthwhile for them to be living their lives like this? I couldn't do that. So, should I just not buy one, or can you just please help me figure out how to do this? And anyway, it was an interesting process.
Yeah.
And I still ended up with some piece of, toxic
piece of death.
Yeah. But it was interesting for everyone to get involved with it. Yeah. And the other customers in the store were asking, and we like, it became a thing.
I can just picture you being so successful with that too, just from what I've seen of you online, like walking into the store and literally everyone is Googling that.
Yeah. We're all there looking it up. What have you got? Yeah. What have you got?
Yeah. If anyone else told me that story, I might roll my eyes and be like, no, you're exaggerating, but no.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Good. Thank you. It was lots of fun.
All right, that's it for our interview with Nora Bateson. You can find all the links and show notes for both parts of the episode at futurethinkers.org/106. Stay tuned, and we have a lot of interesting guests coming up on the show this fall.
To join our watch parties every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific or 5 p.m. UK time, go to futurethinkers.org/livestream. To stay up to date with new episodes, subscribe to Future Thinkers on your favorite platform. And leave us a review or a like. It really helps out the show. And don't forget to share this episode on social media.
Get our 50-page guide on adapting to the future. Sign up at futurethinkers.org/signup.
Upgrade your mental operating system, increase your personal sovereignty, and gain deeper self-knowledge with our courses in personal evolution. Register now at courses.futurethinkers.org.